For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
Hey, welcome back. And so here we are, rugged, ragged, tired, Gen Con just behind us.
After a long drive to Gen Con, Craig, I need my Dunkin' Donuts coffee.
We're alone in Dunkin' Donuts.
All of our friends are back home, sleeping like rational individuals, but not us.
Kind of cavernous.
We're freshly home. Kids are in bed.
There's a bit of an echo because we're all alone.
But we've got our coffees. What'd you get for a donut today?
I did not get a donut today because I ate like a hog throughout Gen Con.
Now, you're still echoing in the chamber here. One thing I
because
noticed,
it's empty.
Do you notice on the way to Gen Con there are Tim Hortons because it's so near the northern border there? Tim Hortons are available on the way to Gen Con. I have stopped at them, and I've got to say, Terrace, I'm sorry, Dunkin' Donuts is better than Tim Hortons. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Way to go. Way to cost us a sponsor.
I'm throwing that down right here, right now. But anyway, we are not here to talk about how good Dunkin' Donuts is compared to Tim Hortons. No, we are here to talk about, one of the things we really have been blown away by, and I'm going to go grab the rule book right now, is, we got a copy of Halo, the new Halo miniature game.
Fleet Battles.
Yeah. I'm going to grab the box right now.
You grab the box so we can make sure that we got the title right.
It literally came to us the weekend before Gen Con. So
days, like literally
like
a couple days.
I get it Saturday, and we're like leaving on Tuesday. Yeah, so it's really like I'm looking at it like I really want to break this open and dive in, but I'm driving to Gen Con in 3 days. It doesn't make any sense right now. So, but I got to flip through the book a little bit, and then we saw it at Gen Con. So, Craig, when you got to that booth, because Spartan Games was there. This is also the first Gen Con Spartan Games was actually present at in themselves with their own booth.
Right.
And Neil and some of his staff members were there. So, Craig, what did you think when you first got to that Spartan Games booth? I'm going to go grab the box.
Well, first I thought that Neil's not nearly as big as he says he is. So that was a disappointment because he's always talking about how fat he is. And he's just like a regular average gamer. So that was just a disappointment. It was intriguing because they didn't bring product to sell. They were selling through the War Store. What they brought was a whole slew of studio painted models for all of their different supported games. So there was the latest stuff from Planetfall was there, the latest stuff from Dystopian Wars, from Dystopian Legions, from Firestorm Armada, and a whole section, actually 3 whole sections on Halo, including just the plastics so people could see what the plastics look like out of the box, beautifully painted plastics, and then resin test pieces for the new 15 millimeter. Well, they think it's going to be 15. They're not 100% sure yet, but 15 millimeter Halo ground combat game that they're going to hopefully come out with in 2016.
So you guys should have seen. So this was interesting too because Spartan, being a small company, right? I mean, they're pretty successful in the miniature gaming space, but they're still a small company. So they're sort of on the outer rim of the main Gen Con area, right? One of the smaller booths, kind of in the smaller company area, not out in the floor there next to Privateer Press or Fantasy Flight Games or any of that stuff. But even so, even in this, there was just a massive crowd always around their booth because Halo. And I think if there was any doubt that the Halo license would transfer well to miniature gaming, that went away for me watching the reaction, Craig, at Gen Con. And, and as I tweeted it, so I tweeted pictures of this, when we first got the game in, I did pop it open and take a couple pictures of the sprues. So if you go back to our Twitter feed, you'll see pictures of the sprues that I took nice and close with a good macro shot from, that we got from Spartan. I then also tweeted a bunch of pictures, and you got to wait through the Gen Con pictures, the bajillions of them, and I'm sure other people did too, but I tweeted lots of pictures of the ships at Gen Con. I think we saw some of them from Salute also. And the reaction, and then also I tweeted some pictures from the 15 millimeter stuff, and I think this might have been the first time those were displayed anywhere.
No, I think they were displayed at Salute.
Were they? Because this is the first time I'd seen them. So I took pictures of them, sent them out, and the reaction and the retweets and the engagement was astounding. I think it's really, there are a lot of people out there that just love Halo so much. And this isn't, what they've had to deal with. Halo fans in the past, what you've gotten for games are Halo Monopoly or Halo Risk.
Or Halo Clicks.
Or Halo Clicks or Halo Lego. There hasn't been a high-end, there might be a couple model kits you can build, but there hasn't been a miniature game of this caliber for Halo at all. This is also interesting because it's Spartan's first venture into plastics. So these aren't resins. The 50 millimeter might be, but the space game,
it's all going to be plastic,
on
man.
Screws.
The box set for the 15 millimeter game is going to be crazy.
Yeah, and two, Craig, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but like the production value here from Spartan, they didn't mess around this time. I mean, I think all their books look good. I think the Halo book looks particularly good. I like the art. They've intermixed it a lot with art shots from the video game in with great, fantastic paints of their stuff. I just think the book, when you flip through it, it's very, very compelling. You get sucked right in. You want to read more. Little things, too, about how the ships are mounted on their bases with smaller escorts being on the same base with larger escorts, and just it just looks... I mean, what do you think about the look of the game, Craig? I think it looks fantastic.
I think it looks very cool. I'm a little concerned mainly because it kind of has what was that game? Arcana. What was that game?
Golem Arcana?
No.
Arcane Legions.
Arcane Legions. That's it. Where the base is doing a lot for you. Or actually, you know what? Because it's working fine. You know what? Not concerned at all.
Yeah, it's more like
X-Wing and Armada do the exact same thing. Not in the same way, but the bases are doing a lot for you. They're telling you a lot about the model. Yes. They're showing you firing arcs,
shield facings. But what I like about them is the way they did the colors on this. It almost looks like you're looking at a tactical holo table.
Yeah,
where and even more so with the busts, right? But you have the ships all painted up, and then there's like these little blue rings around their bases. But it comes, yes, you're right, Craig. I mean, it does take away from the fact that you're looking at a real space scene, but it sort of makes it look like there's little tactical rings about targets. It's like there's the little 3D indicator. So I don't know. It works for me. I doesn't. And you're right. I mean, you think about Armada. For some reason, Armada's got a lot of stuff on the base. And I know that's a sticky point for some gamers, but I think it adds to the experience because there's less to keep track of manually.
Right.
So I like how they look, and I like their bases a lot, and I think the game's very compelling. The only thing I wish so far is fighters are just stacks of tokens right now. And I'd like to see fighters become little models because I'm like that. But
and I'll tell you that's probably not going to happen based on talking to the studio guys and during the demo.
Yeah. So speaking of the studio guys, so I know when Neil was on the show and he started announcing Halo with us, and we talked about some of this stuff, he hinted at 363 Studios, which is the studio, the Microsoft studio that is responsible for Halo nowadays. They took over from Bungie a few years ago. He talked about how they're really involved with them, but what's really, really cool at Gen Con, this is a really cool experience for me, Craig, was that one of the guys from 363 was right there. 343, sorry.
That's okay.
You sure?
343.
Yeah, 343, sorry. From 343 was right there, and it was great to talk to him because he was just fantastic because he's talking about how important to get this right was. And, I asked him, I said, is this the first time really that a lot of the Halo game developers have ever seen some of these models in 3 space other than on a computer screen? And he said, yes. So what's happening is these models are coming back from Spartan Games and the guys are like, oh, there it is in 3D. But in real life 3D, I can look at it. I can hold it. I can.
Yeah, in fact, they were saying I talked for about an hour with Neil and I wish I remembered his name, that 343 guy who was kind of there as a commissar. Talked to them, and they were actually saying that they're giving they're taking all of these models and they're lining them up on a really cool display board, and they're giving them to their writers and to their other designers so that these are now going to be the references for future, like for graphic novels. And so from now on, people are going to have these 3D models. They're so keyed into the canon, according to the 343 Industries guy, that they are now going to be like the go-to model for this individual type of ship.
And the other thing that they mentioned was that this is a lot of people never see all these ships together to scale.
Right.
So Spartan is doing a great job working very closely with 343 to make sure that all the models are right scale so that they all scale correctly compared to each other.
Yep.
And he said it's great because, Halo players look at this ship and say, that ship's huge. There was a whole level on it. And they're like, yeah, but you don't understand how this other ship is even bigger, So you really see the scale difference with the models, and the studio guys are like, oh, I never really realized. So it's just really cool. And one of the things I think was funny to see Neil talk about, he's like, the amount of revenue this game's going to make is going to be like a rounding error on the spreadsheets for Microsoft because,
right.
The amount of revenue that comes in from the Halo franchise is so huge to compare to whatever amount of, even if it's very successful, a miniature game would make. But what was interesting was, he said, yes, so even though we're very, very low on the priority scale in terms of revenue, we're very high on the priority scale in terms of making sure we match canon.
They're at the top. That's what, yeah. The cool thing was because of what they're building this out to be and how these models are now going to be used and go into the future. I don't remember the guy's name, but there's a guy at the very top of 343 who has to okay everything as canon. At the very top level, and everything Spartan does goes directly to him now. Yeah. And so that was Neil was talking, excuse me, about how intimidating that was. Where they're like this financially, they would be towards the bottom of this giant empire of merchandising, but because of what they're doing and what and how dedicated and committed Microsoft and 343 are to the project, they're at the very top. So they're getting. Other projects are getting bumped when Neil's like, okay, so the box game comes with one commander for the humans and one commander for the Covenant. What we really want is to do an expansion that's got, a few more of each. And this guy at the very top's like, okay, we're going to clear the decks and the artists are going to go and they're going to start making concept sketches for you for the artwork and for the busts for these characters. I mean, it's just crazy. Neil was like, it's insane. It's unbelievable that we're so small. The whole rounding error thing was like the speech of the weekend.
His go-to line, yeah.
It was his go-to line. Although he seemed a little hurt when the 343 guy used it. And at the same time, like they're getting number one priority on all the resources of 343 right now. It was pretty amazing.
It is amazing. And so, yeah, and again, I think so they've got it nailed. I mean, it's just fantastic. It's with canon, and it just speaks highly to the quality of Spartan's models. And as Neil said, if you didn't listen to our episode, we talked to him about it. The reason they were able to get this deal was because a lot of the folks at 343 apparently and Microsoft play Firestar Armada. So they were familiar with their work, and when they realized there was an opportunity here to do that, they were very excited about it. And it sounds like they have not been disappointed with the level of detail and quality and attention to making sure everything's exactly right that Spartan Games is doing, which is fantastic.
Yeah. And so, I think I owe somebody an apology, and you'll probably only ever hear it here. The one thing that's really annoying Neil is that there's a rumor out there that his connections with Microsoft is how he got this job. And I think at one point I had said in an interview with Neil, wow, isn't it great that your wife works for Microsoft? I'm making the assumption that that's at least going to give him an avenue. And he pretty much shut me down as soon as I said it. But I'm probably just putting too much on my own shoulders, but I'm afraid that it was that statement that got that out there, because his whole point is that he decided he wanted something bigger for Spartan. He had a vision for Spartan that he needed a partner to kind of go to the next level, and thought, you know what, who has a really cool spaceship IP that I can make a spaceship game that hasn't done it yet, that doesn't really even have on the horizon, that kind of I can carve out a niche for ourselves. And so he actually went to Microsoft as a supplicant with no connection. And that's how he got that, how they forged that, which I thought was very cool.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the gameplay here. So you got a chance to actually play the demo, right, Craig? So did you play a full demo, or how long did you get a chance to actually try the game for?
In my opinion, it was the perfect kind of minis demo. It was a full play of the game through to the end of the mission, but with smaller forces.
Cool. So we'll review go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd say we're going to review the full game in the full show. So don't think that, we're doing this in lieu of that. But a lot of times we get people telling us, hey, we'd like to hear your early thoughts on something. And so we thought the Lost Chapters are a good venue for this, because this is exactly what we would do. We've always said the Lost Chapters is kind of like the behind the scenes when we talk and stuff. And so, Craig and I really haven't had a chance to debrief each other on the Halo demo other than a couple of quick notes. So I was like, Craig, can I talk to you on the Lost Chapters for a while and get all the details?
I had a little medical emergency that caused some problems the day we left. And Russ was going down and is the Halo guy, so I gave him the book. So he had the book and I had the demo.
Right.
And we have not yet debriefed.
So we haven't synced up at all. So I'm like, well, let's just record this so people can hear what we think. We can't count this as a review. We haven't played the game ourselves enough.
And we would never do a review
and not in that way. But I can tell you now that even with the brief contact we've had with the game, this is the kind of game that tells me to get into it. Despite my only concern really for it at this stage, which is 2 factions, right? I want more factions.
Mm-hmm.
There's an opportunity there because the Covenant has a bunch of sub-factions, as Halo players will know. And so there's an opportunity there to eventually expand that out, but we'll see what happens. But Craig, so tell a little bit about, one of the things that's compelling for me, and when you started talking about the demo, I got all excited because one of the things I noticed in the rulebook was clearly the stars of Halo, right? Mm-hmm. Halo is Halo because of these awesomely powerful Spartans, right? Yes. Master Chief in them. And there's also what's been cool about the game is they make awesomely powerful enemy characters that become rivals in the various Halo games, right? So in Halo 1, there's a particular bad guy you got to deal with, and in Halo 2, and there's these certain guys, and there's the Arbiter who eventually does a whole story arc, and he's essentially the Master Chief equivalent on the Covenant side. And so there's guys like that. And what I was really thought was cool as I read through the rules here is I could clearly see there are elements of that in this game. Like you can essentially inject Spartans into enemy ships and cause all kinds of havoc.
Exactly.
Did you see any of that in the demo?
Yes. So the demo was basically, it was 3 formations on the human side and 2 formations on the Covenant side. I was on the Covenant side, and the formations are a combination of capital ships and smaller ships. But the smaller ships, unlike previous Spartan games, the smaller ships, a whole squadron of smaller ships are on a single base,
right?
And so you're looking at that whole squadron is basically a single model, which is awesome because it looks cool, but it really cleans up the gameplay. You're not like frigate on frigate action. You're not worried about like tracking all that different stuff.
What's cool is though it's 3 little models on one base, right? So you get the appearance of, it's a squadron visually, but it's just one base to move around, which I love.
And there's a cool innovative element to all this. The bases have a huge grid of dots on them, of holes in them where the pegs are. Yep. And then right out of Arcane Legions, the card for the specific unit fits over that base with the holes where they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Yep. And the placement of the models on that card dictate what kind of formation it is.
Right. So, and different formations have different mechanics,
different powers, different weaknesses, different weapons. Exactly.
By how this is very similar to Arcane Legions. By how you position your models on their base dictates their abilities, which is just awesome.
Right. Now, unlike Arcane Legions, you're not changing that during the game.
No. Right.
And that's where it is where it is, and when it's dead, it's dead. Right. But it's very clear when you're looking at your sheet. And it says like arrow formation. Oh yeah, cool. That's those 3 frigates in arrow formation, or abreast. Oh, they're all in a straight line. So that was very cool. So I had a capital ship, a giant, cool looking, very organic looking capital ship with some escorts, and then another formation of smaller capital ships with escorts.
Yep. And again, on the capital ships too, you can actually, with the bases, you can have the big capital ship on a base, and little escort ships can be on the same base.
Yep.
Right?
And it's called a supported battleship versus a lone battleship.
And by doing that, not only does it look cooler visually, but it actually adds mechanics and power to the base.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like conversions matter. It's almost like you think about war gear in 40K. It's like I can put this extra guy on my base and it does things.
Yep. Exactly. So the humans had 3 formations, one of the battleship with a little escorts, and one of like cruiser and escorts, and then one ridiculous. The guy was like, "So that's the super powerful formation of the game right now." Mm-hmm. It was 4 stands, 2 of the small frigate squadrons, and 2 of these cruisers, and they were just crazy. And if you know Halo, then you're going to know all the weapons and the Mac this and the Mac that and the right. Plasma this and that and the other thing and the titanium hull getting burned off. I don't know, but they were, but the people all around us were like, "Oh my God, that works just like the video game." Yep. So clearly they hit that out of the park. And then you put all that down, a lot of your ships, like many of Russ's favorite games, have a carrier stat, and that's how many parasite ships, whether you're going to go with fighters or bombers, And then they also have an assault stat. How many assault ships can they have on them? And that's where you're going to decide where your Spartan 3 guy goes in the demo. And is it an avatar? Does that make sense? Is that
they're tokens, right? At this point,
a zealot.
Zealot, yes, the zealot. Yes, the zealot is the elite. It's like the elite, but he's a higher end.
So the Covenant guy gets a zealot, and the human guy gets a Spartan 3. And what happens is that in the game you've got a range of 12 inches basically, and that's your boarding torpedo can go out 12 inches, and you target it, and it's almost impossible to take out the Spartan guy. And you've got like your point defense, like, oh my God, no, please, for the love of God, no. And the guy crashes in. Now the sad thing is I don't know what happens when he's in there, because in our demo, Dave put him right onto one of my cruisers and then started dancing. Like any father of a 5-year-old will recognize the dance. And then for the first time I've ever seen in my life, Dave literally grabbed a guy out of the crowd and went, I'm sorry, I have to go to the bathroom. You're playing, and pulled the guy into the demo and ran. And so the guy was like, I don't know anything about the rules. So he got a briefing and then proceeded to blow up the ship that the Spartan 3 was on.
Oh, dear.
So I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm going to die one way or the other, because the guy was the demo guy was basically like, wow, you're going to put the Spartan 3 on that little ship right there, huh? Okay. and then they blew it up anyway.
The best part was, though, when the ship blows up, does that kill a Spartan 3?
It does not. There's a crazy, ridiculous, like basically 2+ on 2d6 reroll for a save, and then he's just kind of floating around in space. And I completely destroyed the formation that he came from, so he was then trying to float back towards the battleship so he could get back in the game, because he can't re-assault because he's just kind of like floating there, but he can move himself into a ship, launch himself on another Pelican, and get out into the battle again.
So one of the most famous scenes in the Halo series is when there's a major bad guy ship, and Master Chief has this bomb in the fighter bay of the current ship he's on, and basically he grabs onto the bomb and launches it and rides it down into the bad guy ship. And so I jokingly in the booth said, so can you do that? And with a straight face says, oh yeah, of course.
Like, not only of course, what he said was, of course, that happened in the last demo I watched.
I was like, want.
And that was crazy, because in that demo, and it wasn't Master Chief, it was a Spartan 3, because they said Spartan. If you had a Master Chief in the game, it would basically be he ends up on that ship and that ship dies. He ends up on that ship and that ship dies. So Master Chief is actually going to be in the game, but he's going to be in the game as a strategic
sort
commander.
Of a mission objective type thing. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so what happened was the Spartan 3 went into the big giant ship and took it out, and it exploded, and he easily made his save, so he was still alive. But when you get a core breach, which is the more damage you do, the easier it is to get a core breach. He got a core breach. The core breach, like many Spartan games, is basically an attack on every model within a certain number of inches, based on the hull strength of the ships. And to get a little deeper into the mechanics are exactly Planetfall. So anybody familiar with Planetfall is going to know exactly how to damage ships in Halo, because you're going to have your stand has 3 numbers on it. So it might be like 5, 4, 3. You have to do 5 hits to take out the first hull point, 4 hits to take, and then take out those numbers. And that's how you're going to get it down. Very cool. Well, never mind. Let me finish that, and I'll tell you another cool side story from interviewing Neil and the 343 guy. So he got onto the Covenant battleship, blew it up. Of course, it's got a crazy number. When you get a core breach, you add those 3 numbers up, and that's how many attack dice you get on every ship within, I think it was 10 inches. And it just blew the entire core out of the game board. The table was just wiped clean by this massive core breach, leaving only the little Spartan 3 token floating in the middle of empty space.
That's awesome.
So that's right out of the video game.
Right. And so you get a number of, usually 1 at most point values, special characters to choose from. But it's not just the Spartan. You could choose Cortana. You could choose famous captains.
Well, those are the captains.
Right.
That's like 2 different things, because you're going to have a commander, and the commander, this is another cool thing. The commander is a little sideboard that you get, and a bust if you were lucky enough to get one. They just made a certain amount to give away at Salute. I've been promised several, but none of them have yet appeared. You don't need them in the game. They don't have any function in the game. You got the sideboard, and what it is you roll 5 command dice, and the command dice are going to come up with different. The whole game is custom dice. It's all about custom dice. So you're getting these icons on the command dice, and you line them up, and your little commander board tells you how you can spend those dice during your turn. So it might be brace for impact, or it might be, lock on weapons. And let's see, if you get 3 of these icons, you put them together for a really powerful ability. So that's very cool. And the humans have certain abilities to reroll dice, and the Covenant have certain abilities to reroll dice. And so that's how your main characters are getting into the game, because they've got a strategic impact on a more high level impact on what's happening. And Cortana is the main game. You just have each of you have a commander. Then what they're going to do is they're going to start coming out with expansions. One of the expansions is AIs. So you're going to be able to buy an AI for your ship. The AI will actually attach to the commander, and then make all kinds of cool stuff happens. And the cool thing that they mentioned about Cortana is the way that the human ships work is you have 1 torpedo value. And that torpedo value is, if you're firing to the front, you get that number. Let's say it's 12. If you're firing to the sides, you can fire 12 in both directions at the same time. And I guess the fluff is that all the human ships fire their torpedoes from the side. And then if your target is to the front, they arc around to the front, very anime style.
Right.
And that is less accurate than direct firing from the flanks. So that's how they justify you're going to be able to fire 24 dice total if you're firing in both directions at the same time, or 12 dice to the front. What Cortana allows you to do is she makes your torpedo firing more accurate, so you get to add those flank attacks to something in the front. So you're firing 20, whatever that. I mean, it's not 24. I'm just coming up with
some
a number
large number
in my head, but some large number of torpedoes directly to the front.
So we're going along, but so what was your final, after playing the game, what did it feel like to you? Did it feel like?
It felt like a very cool, streamlined Spartan game. I love the fact that they brought in those aspects from Planetfall. The movement is not at all fiddly. The movement is very cool. The bases have your 45 degrees on them, and basically your ships are going to be allowed they have to move half their movement minimum straight ahead. They have to move half their movement. They're going to get one 45-degree turn, depending on the side. You've got the capitals, you've got the battleships, and you've got the small ships. Small ships can make a 45-degree turn at the top and the bottom. The medium capital ships can make a 45-degree turn at the top or the bottom of the move. And battleships can make a 45-degree turn at the end of the move. Other than that, you're not using templates. You can eyeball it using the stands. So it's like they learned from that. The fact that you've got all the smaller ships on a single stand made it much faster.
How did the custom? So this game has custom dice, right?
Well, thank you, Rob. That's the one thing we should probably make sure that we cover is of course, Spartan Games is known for their exploding dice mechanic, and they've been mitigating that exploding dice mechanic as their games mature to the point now where it's not every 6 explodes. It's on certain circumstances. So when they came up with their first basic spitball plan and sent it to the Microsoft guys, the Microsoft guys were like, we love it, except we don't think it makes any sense that a little frigate could blow up a giant battleship if you roll a ridiculous number of 6s. And the Spartan Games guys were like, well, I could see that. I mean, it's a cool visual, but it doesn't happen in Halo. So they went back, and what they did was, instead of using regular D6s, you have a D6 with icons on it. It's 2 hits, 1 hit, a skull, and some miss icons. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you are not allowed to re-roll. The skull means a dead die. You can't re-roll it for anything. A 1 does 1 damage, a 2 does 2 damage and allows you to reroll, but only one of those basic miss dice. So you're limited to the number of dice in your original pool.
Right. You can't get more than the maximum roll you could have rolled first time, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's this cool sliding scale called the firing solution that your average firing solution is, and it goes up and down based on range and countermeasures and all kinds of cool stuff and what weapons you're using. Your basic default is a 2 counts as 2 hits, and you get to re-roll it if you have any misses to spend. If it goes up, all 1s and 2s count as 1s, but you get to re-roll the 2s. And then up higher, they only count. You can't re-roll if you go low. So it's very, very cool. It's on a sliding scale. It's a very simple chart to look at while you're playing. It was a very interesting new iteration of the exploding dice mechanic that we know from Spartan. So there's a lot of cool new stuff in this game. The models were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. They painted up great. The demo was awesome. They had a huge, I don't know the ships, but they had an enormous Covenant ship that they built in 2 days and shipped to America just for this demo table. And it was the size of the demo table, and it was to scale to the rest of the ships.
Yeah, everything's to scale, which is insanity.
Yeah, so it's like a 5-foot-long ship that was to scale to the other ships. So that was
what's
crazy.
tricky is there's rules for what they call massive elements combat.
Yeah.
And you can fight these ships, and then sections of the ship get wrecked, but the ship still functions. It's like the middle section's been taken down, but the rest of it's still working. And so there's, I don't know. I mean, I'm interested to see how that plays out. The mechanics looks pretty interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing that on the table. So they're definitely thinking through like how this would work on various scales of combat. So it's really, really interesting.
Yep, absolutely. And you're also going to love, Russ, that once your fighters are dead, they're not dead. They can respawn.
Oh, nice.
So fighters fighters reminded me of the iteration they had when you loved them in Dystopian Wars.
Yeah, awesome.
Where they were kind of like a weapon system that launches out. They're kind of floating out there, and then they kind of cling. They like snap to something and they attack it. If they die, once the entire squadron is dead, it can respawn later on if its original ship is still alive. So yeah, I think they streamlined some stuff. I think they really kind of tweaked a few things that I think it was a beautiful partnership to have someone like Microsoft come in and kind of rein Spartan in on a couple of their rules and kind of like cut to the core vision Spartan has, where sometimes I think they might get a little more like a lot of us when we're doing stuff, we get a little more complicated because it makes sense in our head. I think this is a really cool marriage of two visions coming together, and really to the benefit of the Spartan rules system as a whole. Yeah.
Oh, dude, did you actually have one of the Mac cannons on the table?
These are like space platforms. All of the human ships have Mac cannons, and the Mac cannons have this crazy special rule where every Mac cannon has a certain value, and you add up all the values, and then you use those values to tell that you can actually damage a Covenant ship before you even shoot at it.
Nice.
Depending on how many Mac cannons you're bringing to bear on a single attack. So
yeah, they have this. So they have the platforms in the game too. The mechanics are all in the book, and for those who don't know, Mac is the magnetic accelerator cannon, basically giant rail guns. In one of the Halo games, the humans have built a bunch of these in orbit to defend against the Covenant's attack. So it's just cool to see them in the game too. So it just so much great captures there. I can't wait, Craig. So on my deck is to paint these bad boys up, and we'll get them to the table here in the near future.
Absolutely. You got to give me half of them, dude.
All right, fine. Which side do you want? Covenant or?
I don't know. We don't have to decide
we'll work that out.
Here.
All right.
All righty.
So, well, needless to say, we were sufficiently impressed, and I think I didn't see too many people who weren't like blown away by it when they walked into the booth. So
no, the demo table was really hard to get to all weekend long, and like I said, they sold out. By Saturday, they were completely out.
Yeah.
It's exciting as a Spartan fan to see their games kind of maturing again. And it's exciting. I would imagine, all of the Halo fans were super excited because they were just squeeing the entire time.
Yeah, it's great timing too, because the new Halo's coming out soon. So this is great, for them as well.
No, it's almost as if these guys are professionals.
It's almost like they know what they're doing. But, I can't wait, Craig. And I'm a huge Halo fanboy, so I'm loving this. This is right up my alley, and it just blends two of the things I like the most. So, very, very cool. So that's
cool.
Our first level overview, and I'm sure we'll have the game in all its full glory on the show in the not too distant future.
Sounds good. Now let's get the heck out of Dunkin' Donuts and go home.
Right.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.